and welcome to the Food Systems Pavilion. I know it is now 5 o'clock and a lot of us are actually getting ready to go off, but thank you so much for taking your time and joining us for this very interesting session. It's called Evolving Landscapes, Are Our Diets and Food Systems Adaptable and Resilient? I am Ben Wisman and I'm from the CGIAR Nutrition Impact Platform, co-hosting today together with the Food Systems Pavilion. And joining us in this session is actually the CGIAR Initiative on Asian Megadeltas. So two of us from two different collaborators sharing the same session to hope to bring a little bit more conversation on landscapes. Now, why landscapes? Evolving landscapes in a climate challenge world affect and are also affected by our responses to transform food systems. Changes such as rapid urbanization, migration, conflicts, drought, rising sea levels, and salinity are threats to global food baskets, affecting the food and nutrition security of vulnerable populations. Often, food systems approaches that we have developed and put in place are not responsive to rapid changes, especially adapting to climatic threats. Very often, we look at technologies that are already obsolete by the time it comes to responding to a threat. So what we need to see, we want to see context-specific, nutrition-sensitive approaches that are co-designed, owned, and also used by communities. And these are the key pathways to respond to such evolving landscapes, both in space, geographically, and also in time. Now, to kickstart our conversation, I'd like to share with you a video from the Asian Megadeltas Initiative. So may I please have the producers play it? Thank you.
Asian megadeltas are home to tens of millions of people. They provide food and economic security beyond this population and are biodiversity hotspots. However, they face several challenges, such as shrinking and sinking due to climate change and unsustainable development. To address these urgent concerns, CGIAR, together with relevant stakeholders, is implementing the initiative on securing the food systems of Asian megadeltas for climate and livelihood resilience, or AMD. The AMD initiative aims to create resilient, inclusive, and productive deltas which maintain socio-ecological integrity, adapt to climatic and other stressors, and support human prosperity and well-being. AMD will transform food systems toward greater climate resilience by removing systemic barriers at community, national, and regional levels to enable the scaling of existing and emerging technologies and practices. The initiative will focus on three main deltas in Asia. These are Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta in Bangladesh and India, Irrawaddy Delta in Myanmar, and Mekong River Delta in Vietnam and Cambodia. To achieve the goals of AMD, the research team will work on 5 focus areas, namely adapting deltaic production systems, nutrition-sensitive deltaic agri-food systems, de-risking delta-oriented value chains, inclusive deltaic food systems governance, and evidence-based delta development planning. Focus Area 1, adapting deltaic production systems. The focus area will facilitate innovation scaling to support resilient, diversified deltaic production systems and reduce environmental footprints and climatic risks. This will be done by convening stakeholders in learning alliances, providing technical know-how on land suitability and agronomy, and enabling value chain development. Focus Area 2, nutrition-sensitive deltaic agri-food systems. Focus Area 2 will ensure that deltaic food systems sustain and enhance nutrition security equitably in a context of rapid change. The first requirement of designing appropriate nutrition-sensitive interventions is to understand the characteristics of these systems and their socially differentiated nutrition implications. Focus Area 3, de-risking delta-oriented value chains. We aim to reduce climate risks among smallholders, including women and youth, and facilitate investment. In deltaic value chains through digital climate advisory and complementary services, or DCAS. Focus Area 4, inclusive deltaic food systems governance. Through Focus Area 4, AMD will strengthen capacities of national, provincial, and local actors to plan, design, and implement more sustainable food systems. Improve inclusivity and accountability of public and private agricultural-related investments and interventions in the AMDs. Focus Area 5, evidence-based Delta development planning. This focus area will improve the development of climate-resilient and inclusive food systems in Asian megadeltas. Through evidence-supported policy dialogue and strategic planning and investment. Critical to the work will be building strong policy science partnerships and working with diverse actors and alignment towards common goals. Using participatory approaches, relevant stakeholders have been actively involved in the co-development process of the AMD initiative.
Each focus area is working with other CGI initiatives and leveraging the research results from those initiatives. And in the countries, we are building effective partnerships on two fronts. For research, and on the other hand, we're working with scaling partners, national partners and international development partners, and with their programs, because we cannot have impact alone. We need to work with partners who have the means to scale our research outputs effectively.
Through AMD, climate-smart agricultural practices and nutrition-sensitive interventions will help boost farm incomes, sustainability, and employment. It will contribute to poverty reduction in the region, where about 36% of the population is poor. AMD will provide science-based evidence and data that will support policies and investments. Crucial issues such as equity, diverse, and nutritious diet, migration of people, and youth in the Delta food systems will also be tackled in the AMD. With the support of all the stakeholders, AMD's holistic food system and people-centered approach will help build resilience and climate change in the Delta.
Thank you so much. We're having a nice laugh because to help kickstart the conversation, we actually have the lead of the Asia Megadeltas Initiative, Dr. Bjorn Olesander, who's here with us. He is from the International Rice Research Institute, currently based in Bangkok, and he will provide us a little bit more depth into what we've just seen. Ola, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben. That was already a nice self-promotion here. So I prepared a few slides because I thought 10 minutes without any slides maybe a bit, everyone would get lost. So the topic of this session is of course quite broad, and I guess that all the speakers will focus on different aspects of the overall topic. So I will focus a bit on the adaptation aspect. And I thought it's maybe good to present a few examples. So I show 2.5 examples of adaptation cases with different outcomes, and then hope that they come to the same to one conclusion in the end. So you've seen this map before. We're working on in 3 different deltas and on different, mostly climate stresses. And I will focus on one particular today, which is salinity intrusion, and how coastal areas can adapt to higher salinity levels. Because that is one of the big concerns of stakeholders in the countries that we work in, that came through various consultations, always up as a very high priority. And also farmers, if you ask them, it's not something that they expect in the future, as something that happens now. And if you ask them a few years later, they see the aggravating effect. And that's generally, say, because of 3 main factors. Sea level rise, very obviously, is much faster than the projections were some years ago. Then the deltas are generally sinking due to different aspects. One is groundwater extraction, another one is sand mining. There are different factors for that. And the third aspect that is responsible for higher salinity intrusion is different weather patterns, El Nino in particular, when we have less rainfall in Southeast Asia, meaning that also less fresh water is coming down the river, which usually would push out salinity towards the coast. And if there's less fresh water, salinity intrudes much more deeply into the delta. So those 3 aspects make up for this climate stress. And I'll show you 3 examples for adaptation. So one is one that already was started a few years back under the Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security Program. It's called the CS-MAP approach, Climate Smart Mapping and Adaptation Plans, which was developed through a mission in 2016, actually, when we had a very drastic drought in Southeast Asia. 500,000 hectares were affected in Vietnam alone by salinity intrusion. And so different institutes had a mission to the delta, looked at what has happened, developed also some short, medium, and long-term recommendations. And one of them was looking at changing cropping calendars, and with that, firstly looking into where do we find which kind of climate risks and stresses. And so and that really came out of discussions with stakeholders in the region. So, and this approach was actually then developed by one of the departments in Vietnam, the Department of Crop Production in MART, and all the information came from stakeholders in the region. So we basically went there and asked which district experiences salinity problems on a regular basis every year, and which ones in extreme years. And so we just collected that from all districts in the country, put that together in maps so that you can actually look at it and see it and then act upon it. And that in that way, I think, because it's not our product really, it's the product of people from the region, there was quite a strong ownership by national partners, and they acted upon it, and they used these maps to change the cropping calendar in coastal areas, basically to avoid times where salinity would be high. So that's in Vietnam, that's generally March, April, and now what you can also see here, what has happened, don't try to look too much on this here. What has happened, which we detected with remote sensing some years later, is that they shifted rice sowing earlier. Oh, that's, where's the pointer? So you see here in December, there was much more rice sown in 2017-18, and it got less over the years, whereas in October and November, more rice was sown then. So they were sowing rice earlier to harvest it before salinity came in. Very simple, actually, and it only needed a bit of kind of facilitating the process. So that was one example. So El Nino came back a few years later in 2020 to a similar extent, and only around 50,000 hectares were affected then. So it was really very effective adaptation option for rice in that case. A different adaptation option now from the Ganges Delta is this one. Also area where salinity did not allow for rice cropping anymore in certain seasons. And together with SIP, we introduced the zero tillage potato and used rice straw for mulching. So they also introduced high potato varieties with higher salinity tolerance, so that was actually able to grow. And to attach to that, so it was a very co-productive approach with communities in the region. There was a gender analysis attached to it to understand where are women involved in potato production. And then they discussed different aspects of that. So it increases, of course, soil health with zero tillage and mulching. It has a lower environmental impact, for example, because rice straw is used and not burned. Without tillage, it's actually something that then, so tillage was usually done more by men. Without that, women could be more, could take more ownership of the whole production, and therefore it's also kind of an empowerment. And generally, the mixed cropping system provided a higher profit. This is the half case because we don't have really an evaluation yet of that. It's a fairly recent case. The third one is this one, again back to Vietnam, and again back to the coastal areas where with aggravating salinity, the government suggested to switch to rice shrimp systems. There were infrastructure projects, so sluice gates and dikes, and these could be used for two purposes. You could protect areas from salinity intrusion to allow rice farming, or you allow salinity water to get in and allow shrimp farming. So, but you could only do one or the other, and the system was that the community votes, and the majority basically decides what happens, and the minority has to adapt to the majority and has to follow that. So if you were a rice farmer and you wanted to grow rice, but the majority said, no, shrimp is better, you had to grow shrimp. You have no chance to do the other way around. So it was a system where really the individual does not have much decisive power. So you have to adjust. And that led to conflict, and we had an experiment or socio-economic experiments there where we could show that this system led to conflict behavior. So there is a minority, there's always farmers that are forced into something, and through behavioral research you could show that this leads to more destructive behavior. So they would not act due to their economic best options anymore necessarily, but projected more destructive behavior. And that was shown in a kind of a game setup, but thinking about that has also implications on the whole commune and how people live together and work together. So it's this adaptation from that was kind of forced upon some of the farmers led to problems. And here, I mean, we're trying to now figure out what can we do, what's best to do. There needs to be probably some support for this transition, maybe some kind of insurance. So we're still working with local governments to see how can this transition be happening in a more equitable way. And that's basically my last slide. So with that, that's the main idea is of these examples, that some adaptation options that are more taken in a participatory and more people-centric approach led to better outcomes, as the last example that I showed you, where just someone decided and said, this is how we do it, without being much or very inclusive. So that's basically what I wanted to show here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ola. It's very enlightening to see different approaches, and sometimes they work, and we also have to acknowledge that sometimes approaches don't work, right? From the deltas, we're going to head north a little bit, and we would like to hear some case examples from China. And to help us share the story today, it'll be Nicholas Forsell. He is the, let me get this right, the Senior Research Scholar from the Integrated Biosphere Future Group. That's correct. He's from the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, IIASA. With that, I hand the floor over to Nicholas.
Thank you very much, Ben. So, I'm Nicholas. Well, that was clear, but actually shouldn't be me presenting this one. So the main person that has been really leading this work, that's Mingping Chen at Renmin University. And she's been leading this work, but she unfortunately could not be here today. She's arriving a little bit late to the COP, so I was the one who was sent forth to present the work that we're talking about today. So this is a collaborative work with a number of universities across China, as we from IAS are lending a helping hand, whatever. I would say that the majority of the work is really led by the Chinese group and not by me itself. So let's see how this one operates. So what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to actually talk about not the adaptation, but actually the mitigation part of the story. And what we're really going to talk about is the potentials of and the impact of changing diets. That's the key zone. So what we really know in China, they have a huge target and aim to reduce their emissions. And one of the key sources that we do know on globally is the agricultural sector, both in terms of land use, land grabbing, and that it is a major emitter on a global level, also in China on itself. Now, also in China, we have seen a huge development of the agriculture sector and the food consumption over time. And what we're really, well, always when I go there, I love the Chinese food. And there's a huge variety of food aspects. But we've also seen a huge development of the sector. So here what you're looking at is the food intake over time. So this is huge development all the way from 1960 up to 2020. And you can see it's spiking, right? And the question is really what is going to happen in the future if this continues into the future, right? So the Chinese diet is very particular. It's very unlikely the food that I have in Vienna. But you can see it's very much fruits, very much a lot of vegetables, not as much meat as we have in Europe consumption, but you do have pork and other things coming on. And what you do see now really recently is the more money that comes into the system, the more people take up more of a Western style of a diet, eating more higher consumption levels, and is not only eating more and creating also more waste. That is, you have a tradition of having more waste that goes into the future. So what we really wanted to look at in this study is really what is the implication if we could change this into a different diet. So what we're looking at is actually a business as usual diet. So we continue the trends that we currently have and now the development versus two different diets. One is development by the Eat Lancet group, where you have, as you see in the middle here, the Eat Commission, where you indeed have a huge continuation of a diet that is more vegetarian diet. The other one that we're looking at is if people were to purely follow their own Chinese guidelines. So the Chinese government had taken out a nutrient development system, the dietary guidelines of how they foresee and see people would like to eat. So they basically have the pyramid that you see at the far end there on what they basically would like people to consume over time. So basically what we're looking at, we're taking a number of models that is been developed in a number of countries, but it then been parameterized and improved by the Chinese colleagues. So all of these are models that have been developed at other places, but taken up by the Chinese colleagues. They have improved and made sure that they actually are fit for purpose in the Chinese context. And then we're looking at what are the implications if we do see a pure uptake of these diets, right? To see what the development would be. So what you're looking at here is the development of food consumption over time. So you have the business as usual scenario, that's the BAO scenario, continuation of historical trends, where you see a continuation of the calorie consumption strong over time. You see an increase both on the vegetable side as well as also on the animal-based products. Then we have the two other scenarios that you see, the Eat Lancet as well as the Chinese guidelines, where you see a strong peaking of the calorie consumption by 2030 and a mitigation over time. So you see, if we were to implement, if these diets were to be taken up, how much they can reduce the consumption over time. So we're basically talking about a reduction of calories by roughly 700, almost 800 calories by 2050. So we can almost peak, we can ensure that we reach a peaking by 2030, and by we come to 2050, we're already down to levels in 2010. In terms of the mitigation, though, this is the important part, is sort of what we're looking at is how much the emissions can be reduced purely in China if these diets were taken up. So what you're looking at here is the emissions, first of all on the left-hand side of the business as usual scenario, and then the mitigation, so the reduction of emissions by 2050 if these diets were to taken up. And then so you see that for the Eat Lancet as well as the Chinese guidelines, you see a very, very strong mitigation potential if these diets were taken up. So this is the mitigation in China themselves if they were taken up. And the interesting thing, if you compare that to a 1.5 degree development for the agriculture sector, you would actually end up at levels where the agriculture sector in China would be fully in line with a 1.5 degree projection. So this is all caused due to strong reduction of consumption, at least a reduction of the production side as well as the consumption side, of course. So that's basically the key messages that we have, that if these diets were to be successfully taken up as they are being discussed, that they could have a very, very strong positively impact on the emissions in China. They can reduce the emissions by at least 50% and put the agriculture sector fully in line with the Paris Agreement projections. Now, of course, there are huge differences. On the big question mark is actually how do we actually get there, right? Because of course this is stylized analysis and all models, and I'm a modeler, so I know all the uncertainties within them, so don't worry about that. But indeed, a lot of work is still needed on really how do we implement and actually successfully make sure that people would be willing and are interested in taking up this diet. So the key message is really sort of here the power of taking up this diet, but there's huge uncertainty still in how do we actually implement and actually go forward. So that's the next step, and I would say in our work and what we're going to look at further down the line. But I thank you all very much for your attention, and happy to have discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, for giving us that very interesting input from China. From the north, we're going to head south again. And moving to another country, I'd like to invite Thuyen Yun. She is the research team leader for the food environment and consumer behavior. She comes from Vietnam, and she will give us a case from Vietnam.
And to be honest, 10 minutes very difficult for me to share because the food system work is really complicated, and I even continue to learn together with other CG colleagues in the country, and we all together contribute to the transformation at different levels, in the north, in the south, at the national level, and even we taught and try to see the leverage point in different food system elements from production, from food environment and diet. So, so I think let me share, instead of sharing the publication, there will be a lot, so I decided to think a little bit further about the process, and thus I highlight different people joining together and from different support, from different initiatives. Yeah. So just the quick one for you to see in the slide later, because at the beginning, we started work in food system. We listen to different partners. We understand that beside the achievements that Vietnam have obtained from accumulated process for the energy to shut out the hunger in terms of energy of food security. And but the country right now in another stage of the socio-economic development, and think a little bit further with the development of technology and also the awareness of the people in the country. So think beyond of the energy, think about micronutrient deficiency, think also about the malnutrition, not in terms of the underweight or stunting, but also about obesity, and also urbanization and migration. Many things must the country. In addition to that, about the natural characteristics of Vietnam, that a long country with 54 minor ethnic groups, different culture. So sometimes the country get stuck in the transition because they don't know how to make the harmonization for different demands, and how the food production can move under the strategy agriculture to move to agribusiness to contribute not only socio-economic but also try to think beyond that for the nutrition and health and environment. And to capture that, it took a lot of time from the global food system profile, global food system framework to downscale to national level and subnational level. Why we need to do that? Because we talk about the national level and local food system. We cannot bring that one to them. They will not understand where they are and how they work together. Unfortunately, in the context of Vietnam, the agriculture is still much here, and there is no one in charge for interlinkage. And I'll come more with Ministry of Health and other ministry. And there is no linkage and not existing the multi-sector mechanism to make the food system move for different outcomes. For that reason, it took a lot of time to develop from the global scale up to national and subnational level. Why we need that? Because we need to show the linkage of the diet as an intermediate outcome. So why diet? Why not the final outcome? Because when we talk with different ministry, if we talk about production, they will, Ministry of Health will say you talk with Ministry of Agriculture. And if we talk about nutrition, Ministry of Agriculture get to talk to Ministry of Health. And we don't know where to start and how to start. At the end, we think about something between the ministries and the healthy diets. Sometimes like can be a leverage points where the multi-stakeholder can work together at different levels. And we try because we don't know how we start. We even don't know, no publication can show at the local food system to work together for different outcomes by different angle. We also recognize it's not easy like we think, healthy diets, but not possible because still 50% of low-income households, they cannot afford the healthy diets. And even healthy diets do not mean plant-based only, because in the context of Vietnam, the stunting prevalence in mountainous areas is still a big problem. And we cannot think beyond only one thing, but think together about affordability, availability, accessibility, and also acceptability of the culture. So really hard to think. We cannot do everywhere in the country, unfortunately, because the diversity of the country. We started with different local to listen from different sector and try for them to figure out themselves where they would need to prioritize and what's the thing they will do later. But they need to understand the trade-off of different outcomes. If we go this way, what happened another way? And then we cannot do everything. So like all I mentioned, we think about scaling. Who can support that? We get the support from the Department of Cooperative and Rural Development to integrate nutrition sensitive area food system in AMD together with others. And we made the guidelines to develop. And finally, we successful with the Department of Cooperative to integrate nutrition sensitive approach inside the poverty reduction national target program in Vietnam. That's a big movement because they think beyond energy. It took a lot of time to do that, but we cannot blame them. because that Vietnam undergone the long periods of time of the the hunger. So they think more about to food the stomach, but not about nutrients or something like that. And then that's one we would like to highlight also the big effort from CGR along in 2021. We tend to that movement. We got CGR together, we got different partners, etc. together to put a story. And based on that one, finally the sustainable and healthy days and food system integrated in the Q&A guidelines of the Vietnam under the Ministry of Agriculture to put the first door to go down to the system of the agriculture, and also trying to go together, different initiatives together. Like I would like to share, because that's not the end. We still go there, but we use the multi-stakeholder approach with different level, different people. And next step, they will establish the food system partnership. That's the mechanism to manage the food system. And we have technical working group and CGR all the time from periods of time before in 2021 up to now still continue. But those things can highlight the process. We hope to have other opportunity to keep you updated along, but we see that a bit of opportunity right now in Vietnam to be ready, but there is still many things to be explored. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Truyen. And it's also very nice to hear about how we actually need to unpack all these global concepts and make it tailor-make it to be context-specific. You know, you can't just adopt and not adapt it, right? So, going a little deeper, zooming in a little bit deeper into another landscape will be the cities. And with that, I have with me Simon Heck. Simon is the Director General for the International Potato Center, SIP, and he's also the lead for the initiative on resilient cities. So, Simon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ben. Yes, good afternoon, and I will be brief. I want to thank you first for inviting me. I'm not a close member of this research team, but we have a related initiative in the CGIAR on urban food systems. And since we started actually as an institutional move and an institutional recognition of the importance of urban food system, the CGIAR now also has a senior director for urban food systems, and I have been asked to initially fill that role. So we look forward to working more on urban. And why are we doing that? Well, traveling to Dubai, of course, you're not surprised that we do live on an urban planet. And looking into the future, not too far, we can see that more than 2/3 of the world's population will live in cities. That in absolute numbers will include 5.5 billion in low and middle income countries, consuming more than 80% of the world's foods. So clearly urbanization is a main driver of food system transformation everywhere. And as you see this example from Lima, Peru, where I'm based, urban landscapes are also landscapes, and with a lot of wonderful people inside. They are not problems as such, they are stakeholders in our food systems. What we know, however, and a weakness one would say is there is a disconnect institutionally in terms of planning, investment, policy, also research between urbanization and agriculture. And that leads to a number of problems and missed opportunities. We should be actually surprised by that. If you look back in the 8,000 years ago, right, the rise of the first cities was enabled through agricultural innovation and surplus production. And ever since then, it was cities and urban population, urban markets that have provided the incentives for agricultural innovation. So the two have really evolved in tandem. Yet of recent, given our bureaucratic approaches, it has been rather separated, leading to a number of risks, right? We know there are risks around food security, nutrition, health and environment. One example that the Urban Initiative has been working on together with colleagues from the World Bank is to actually project under different climate scenarios the impact of the physical expansion of cities, just the physical one, on future crop and livestock supply chains. In a number of cities we've done this. This is an example here from Nairobi. This is the global summary of the different cities that shows you that under 5 different climate scenarios, significant crop losses are being projected in Africa, up to 20%, just from the expansion of cities into prime agricultural land. Similar figures are available for livestock as well. So clearly, you know, the disconnect between urban planning and agricultural planning leads to this kind of undesirable outcome. On the other hand, we also need to look at missed opportunities, right? Urbanization does provide opportunities in terms of economic value, jobs, but also in terms of health, access to services, farmers' incomes, etc. We do need to recognize that the informal food sector is amongst the largest employers of the urban poor. More than 30%, the ILO estimates, of urban poor are actually employed or find some kind of livelihoods in the informal urban food sector, making it the second largest after which one? The construction sector, the informal construction sector, right? But clearly, with some more forward-looking planning, one would be able to utilize that set of opportunities also for our urban poor and for women and youth in particular. Now, not so long ago, right, we used to assume that with urbanization, diets and food security will improve, right? People would have access to more diverse set of foods. However, that has not turned out to be the case. So this recent study by De Bruyne and Holloman and FAO tells you that in countries, and these blue dots are different countries, with very high urban population growth, more people are unable to access healthy diets, right? In some cases, close to 100% of the population are unable to access healthy diets. Whereas in countries with slower urban population growth, that's not the case. So this is an important kind of mindset shift that we need to recognize, that urbanization at this time, in terms of the nutrition impact, right, has that risk that it can jeopardize access to healthier diets, although, let's say, income is increasing, etc. This kind of trend has been further substantiated in a small study we did in Nairobi together with our initiative and another initiative, colleagues from IFPRI, to look at the impact of rising food prices in Nairobi on both the poverty levels between rural and urban Kenya, as well as the dietary quality and diversity levels. What you see here, you know, the headline conclusion is whilst the urban poor are more resilient in terms of poverty, meaning they find alternative areas of income and employment, they are highly vulnerable to dietary deprivation, meaning it's not as easy as we always assumed, that if you have a bit more money, you can access more food. You know, the urban food system is not fit for that at this time. And with huge risks, and given the numbers I mentioned in terms of overall populations, a lot is at stake. The question, of course, is how do you then improve urban food systems so that, you know, the higher potential for income can also be translated into better diets under different kinds of stresses. Similarly, there has been an assumption, you know, and we're all sympathetic to that, right, that the localization of food system and food supplies would increase urban food security and diets rather than, you know, being increasingly dependent on very long value chains. Now, studies caution us, right, that that's not a blanket recommendations. There are many cities where that would actually increase risks that don't have a very rich agricultural hinterland, let's say, so that the conclusion, if you look across a number of these urban food supply strategies, is recommended that it's the right balance and mix of short and long-term and long value chains that will increase resilience and hence food security. This has been a study combining studies in the global north as well as in the global south. Finally, I do want to say that our initiative on urban food systems also now looking at new collaborations. We know that urban food systems are not just an extension of rural food systems, right? Cities are not passive recipients of food. Cities are highly dynamic. They create demand, but they also find their own solutions. There's a whole other area of science. As agricultural researchers, we're often not so much aware. There's the science of cities. That's about infrastructure, energy, social issues, etc. And we are now trying to partner with them. We have one collaboration starting in China with Nanjing University, Agricultural University, and another one that also then goes into the Asia megadeltas around a collaboration with the Swiss University, ETH, and the 3 universities in Singapore that looks at integrating actual research in agricultural planning with city development. And one of that ambition there is to actually develop model neighborhoods in cities, not high-income neighborhoods, but low-income neighborhoods that integrate sound urban development and access to services with a green development agenda that includes food production, food marketing, etc. So there's hope that, from the research side, we can step up to that. What we say, coming back to that disconnect, we do need to reconnect the agricultural and the urbanization research through science and innovation. And that's our aspiration. We have a number of strong partners, and one of the best experiences we've had in our work so far is the momentum and the commitment of cities themselves to take charge of that agenda. We have great cities in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America leading the way, reaching out to agricultural research and trying to gather with universities, but also with the private sector to provide better diets for their urban population. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon. Now, with that, another round of applause for our speakers. I'd like to take this opportunity to open up the floor for audience feedback and also comments. So, yes. Just right in front of you, actually. Make things easy.
Thank you for the lunch anyway. He gave me his late lunch. Okay, Hong Nguyen from International Livestock Research Institute, INRI. I lead the One Health Initiative, CGIAR. I have a question to my colleague Thuyen, and I worked with her for long in Vietnam. But today, I have the feeling it's very nice study on food system and diet. And I realized that I was not aware of all of the work in Vietnam. But I remarked that you show some of the history of this research under A4NH. Sorry for non-CG people. That is a CGIAR research program long time ago, moving to sheep, and even with Ole, with this regional initiative. So can you elaborate a little bit more? What is the impact of all this CGIAR research in Vietnam? How was this taken up by national partners? Because Vietnam, in many ways, they progress very quickly into developing on this national strategy, national action plan for food system transformation. So maybe it's good to expand a bit this experience from that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Hong. Before I get a response from Thuyen, maybe I can just open the floor again if there's another question, or if not, then yeah, maybe Thuyen. Is there anyone who'd like to ask a question? No? All right.
Yeah, like I mentioned, because the only short time, so I just highlight the key points. But that's I mentioned the process, and along the process, it's very, how can I say, but really difficult to capture everything along the process, because that's more about at the impact level. When we talk about impact, so then it's not only from CG itself, but also from other stakeholders together. But from the work at the beginning in 2017, we moved from A4NH, and at the time when we talk food system, no one want to listen. Not like now, we invited to be the technical advisory together with other members in the food system national action plan. Because at that time, I played the CG convener role, and also with IRI also support, and also IRI also support like CG process along together to put inside. But I would like to highlight how we turn from research to adoption. because thanks to the UN Food System Summit also, Vietnam were able with CG dialogue together with two national dialogue and three sub-national dialogue about food system, sit together, identify where to go, how to go, what is the challenge right now of food system, not only agriculture. And that's the first time we see the collaboration of Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Health together, with also Ministry at that time they are leader to bring the story. And after that, National Assembly, they put together, they also highlight the importance of collaboration. And also right now, the impact level, we achieve first the active participation of Vietnam in the commitment of the port summit, and now the National Assembly is approved. The next step will be the partnership and also the technical working group will be established to revise the food system provenance mechanism to link with different actors, not only researcher, but also provincial level at the people committee to implement the National Action Plan for the own budget. And now we have two cities in Vietnam issued the decision already to implement the NAP at the Prime Minister level in Ho Chi Minh and Bình Phước. And those are people to make the good entrepreneurs. Example, we cannot say where it will go at the local level. But right now, the impact moved to the local level, one more level already. And the next step, with the partnership group and technical working group, CGR can open the door to link our research, upcoming research from 9 initiatives to map into the food system outcome of nutrition, health, socio-economic, and environment to show how the research can fit into the dialogue of the next step for implementation. Now the impact go to implementation already, no more at the decision. But that will be the process, so maybe more challenging than before. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Truyen. I actually have a question to Simone. So we often see all this global data, for example, in the State of Food Security and Nutrition, the SOFI report that's being published every year. We see national data. And very often this masks the granularity of it that we see in cities. And we know that the rates are actually very different. If we start to take a deep dive into these figures, we realize that cities change very fast. It's very rapid, especially if we talk about, for example, deltaic regions, the rate of urbanization is very fast. And in fact, this year, we see Sophie's theme actually centered on urban-rural nexus and a continuum. Instead of being a dichotomy, it is now a continuum. Right? It's no longer talking about two separate entities, but how each one affects the other. And I just want to take your opinion. Do you see what are the opportunities right there, and how do we very quickly respond to this kind of changes?
Yeah, when I said there's a disconnect between urban and agriculture, that extends into the data area, right? There's a disconnect of data sets and data collection efforts. You know, FAO data is Ministries of Agriculture. Right there, and then how much do they really look into the details of city? Well, not at all. Is the short answer. Yet, cities are very data rich. The economies are extremely data rich as we sit here. Millions of data points are being shared in cities, more so one would think than in rural areas. But how do we tap into that? That's not all government service and government instruments, but it is the real economy, the informal sector. So we need to get around that and say, how do we partner with operators in the informal sector, both service providers as well as real economic food system operators who also exchange price data, etc. How do we get that? How do we capture that capacity, and how do we then elevate that up into a systematic understanding of how cities change very quickly in terms of food, but also in terms of demography, etc. So I think there's big opportunity there. We need a strategy around that. I think organizations like the CGIAR in principle could be a partner to that, but we also need to look at new partners beyond our usual agricultural partner, whom we really value very much, and they need to be part of it. But there are urban stakeholders and urban innovators, urban service providers who haven't really been engaged with when it comes to food security, and we need to do that now. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that response, actually. I'm going to just open the floor for another round. Any more questions? Anyone with a burning question that you'd like to bring to our presenters? Yes, this gentleman at the front. If I can get Simon's mic over.
Yes, thank you. My question goes to Nicholas. I like your presentation, how you show that a shift to sustainable diets can have very positive impacts on climate and also other planetary boundaries. But yeah, the big question for me is how do you make it happen? I mean, that's the key question, and I was wondering if you could give us a bit more insights on that.
Yes and no. I can say it like this. In Europe, we have seen a huge difference. Like, I've been living in Vienna for 10 years. And when I came, there was nothing talk about alternative meat, vegetarian options were very, very few. Vegetarian could be boiled potatoes. That's it. Well, now there are a lot of options out there. But I would say it's been more of a bottom-up movement where it's people who want that food and the people themselves requesting it. And whenever the food option the restaurants came, then you get the direct response back to the restaurant. So it's been more of a bottom-up movement rather than the government really incentivizing, trying to steer it in certain ways. So I think the difficulty that we have now is really the politicians trying to find ways to go into that field in a meaningful way. At the same time, it's very difficult also for the policy people because no one wants to say that my politician stole my steak. And because then you get a really bad reaction back. So I think we're starting to see certain places, they are testing the water a little bit to try and find different ways of doing that, but it's really not a field yet where we really see that the politicians from a really top-down approach can really go into that system yet. So it's something that's going to happen, and we're starting to see some development there, but we're not there yet where we really have really great examples that I can really give where the policies have really come up. It's so far really been much, much more of this kind of bottom-up in that kind of a way. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. And with that, I'd like to close the floor for the audience interaction. Before we end today's session, I'd like to invite Dr. Shakuntala Tilsit. She is the director of the CGIAR Nutrition Impact Platform. She's also the co-host for today. It's been a very long day for all of us right here, and we started right at 9:30 until now. I just like her to say a few words to close this session as well as our engagement for today. Thank you, Shakuntala.
Thank you so much, Ben. And it has really been nice to end the day with this session. And for me, the important word was the first word in the title that we chose for this session, evolving. And it's not we wrote it as evolving landscape, but landscape also includes, well, begins with communities, begins with people. And the examples we have had were quite fascinating when you think about, when I look at the work we do at global level and in different countries, because we had examples on China and examples on Vietnam. And Simon, even you gave this collaboration you were having with Nanjing University, and you, Ola, about the changes that happen in the mega delta. These are regions of the world that where the evolving communities and the changes are really very rapid and very, very different. And surely, if we go to other regions of the world where the CGIAR works, for example, Africa or Latin America and the Caribbean, it's going to be very, very different. Firstly, the evolving that we see with communities and with changes are not as rapid in many parts of the world as it is here. So this is, for me, has been so fascinating to hear the discussion and about just remembering that we are talking about changes that I think are specific. Maybe it lends opportunities and ways of seeing how changes would happen in other parts of the world. But I'm not sure. I think each part of the world will have its own change and own evolvement. So I thank the speakers, and I'm sure all of you have got much to take home with you and to use in the work that you do and in the communities that you work with. So thank you again very much, and I'd like to close the day. As Ben said, we started earlier. How many sessions have we had in this room? 6 sessions. So thank you all for being with us now.